Imagine opening your eyes and you're in the passenger seat of a truck going down a dirt road. And you look and you don't know the driver, and yet you're not nervous because there's a sense of comfort. There's a sense of commonality even though you don't know exactly where you are. And you're passing these fields and you see corn and wheat and these other things and it looks familiar. It looks somewhat unique and yet somewhat familiar. And so finally you break the silence and you turn to the driver and you simply say, "Is this Iowa?" And he laughs and goes, "No, this isn't Iowa." And what's unique about it is while it looks like Iowa to some extent, it is somewhat unique in that it seems like everything that could be grown in the ground is growing all around you. And so you pass one field and you see the wheat standing tall and waving in the wind. You pass another field and there's nothing but sunflowers, so beautiful. And then there's an orchard that every tree is teeming with apples. And you go across a crop full of corn and the stalk is tall and weighted down with the vegetable. And finally you turn to him and you just simply ask, "Where are we going?" And he says, "We're going to go look at your field." You think, "My field? I'm not a farmer. I don't own land." And yet there's this sense of warmth and truth, and you begin to think, what will my field look like? And you can see the sun is burning off the morning fog, and everything is beautiful, and you kind of get this sense of, I can't wait to see what this is going to look like. And suddenly the truck makes a turn, and there it is. And your heart sinks. The field is dusty, dry, lifeless. There's nothing there. And all around you, you see these crops that are full of life. All around you, you see fruit and vegetables and produce that are growing, and it's vibrant in a way that you've never seen before. But here, what the driver is calling your field is dead. And then you hear these words, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap, if we do not give up." If. That word sticks out to you in that moment. If. For you know that you had given up. That there was a time in which your faith was real and it was vibrant and you were active in what was going on. But over time, the weight of the world just began to hit you, the busyness of life, everything that was going on around you. You felt as though you had put in your time and done your work. And there just came a point where it wasn't an intentional decision. It's not like one day you just decided to suddenly start doing evil. It didn't happen that way at all. But there just became a weariness of life where you begin to back off. And what began as a small step was then added on to with another step and another step. And before long, you really couldn't even recognize your faith anymore. And now the reality of it was visually right before you. There was so much potential at some time. There was so much hope that was there of not the power that you had by no means, but the power of your story, what God could save you from, the impact that you could have had, the transformation that could have taken place, the places that he positioned you, the situations that you were in. Had you just been faithful in that moment, you didn't have to do extreme things. You didn't have to do magical things. If you could have just shown faith in the midst of the moment with a trust that a day was going to come, in which it was all going to pay off. But instead, in the pressures of the moment, your eyes got distracted. You became more intrigued by what was going on in the day-to-day. You became more infatuated with making sure that you were beating your neighbor and being better than them, that your kids had more than what they had. And the competition suddenly turned inward in every way possible. And it's not as though you made the intentional decision to forget about investing in heaven. It's the concept that very slowly apathy set in if we don't give up. Jesus tells a parable that we don't like very much. It's the parable that many theologians believe is the parable that unlocks all of his teaching. It's the parable of the sower. That a man goes out to sow some seed, and that seed falls along 4 different types of soils. The first is a path. It's beaten down. It's hard. The seed just sits on top of it. The birds come in and pluck it away before it has any time to do anything. 2 of the others are a little bit more unique. The seed is sown, and it begins to grow. It goes below the surface just like it's supposed to. And before long, it begins to grow. But what we don't realize is that just below the surface, some things are happening that's going to prevent this seed from full fruition. In one of the soils, it's really shallow. It can't grow roots. And so while everything looks great, while the conditions are right, everything looks perfect. But when the sun reaches its height, when it begins to really beat down, when life gets difficult, the seed is burned up because it didn't have the resources to draw from. Well, the seed in the other soil also looks good. It's beginning to grow up exactly like it's supposed to. But what we can't see is that just below the surface, there's a competition that's taking place. The thorns and the thistles are competing with the roots of the new plant, and we can't figure out who's going to win to get the resources that are necessary. And before long, the thorns and the thistles take over. Jesus describes these thorns and thistles as the cares of this world, the competitions and the values of this society. And that plant too dies. And it's only the seed sown among the good soil that takes root and flourishes and becomes what it's supposed to become. Now we hear that parable all the time, and we don't think much about it, because if we really go to dig down deep into it, we begin to realize the testimony that Jesus is giving us is that not everybody who appears to follow Jesus is really following Jesus. That it shouldn't surprise us now. It shouldn't surprise us whenever we communicate the gospel to some people and it never takes root in their lives. They have no interest in it whatsoever. It shouldn't surprise us. It doesn't prevent us from our need or our necessity to give them a chance to respond to the gospel, but it shouldn't surprise us when some just don't have time for it. But it also shouldn't surprise us that there will be some among us that will seemingly be a follower, and everything's going great, but what we don't realize is that the only reason they're a follower in the moment is because all the conditions are right. That when persecution hits, when trouble comes, when life takes a turn they didn't expect, and now they're commanded to submit to the sovereignty of God. When something is demanded of them, maybe a recognition of their own sin, and now they have to confess it to more than just somebody else, but to a group of people. When faith gets difficult, they're going to walk away. Never a true believer. They never really had the roots. I know on the outside it looked good, but we can't be the true judges of that. But instead, time will begin to prove that grace really never buried down deep in their hearts and their souls. It shouldn't surprise us when some walk into this place and they seem really energized by what's going on. But the moment something is demanded of them, they walk away. It shouldn't surprise us when some are appearing to flourish, but what we don't recognize is that below the surface, in their hearts. There is a competition going on between the gospel and the cares of this world. And that it might happen in short time, it might take a long period of time, but if they keep on investing in the values that everybody else values in the competitions of this world, if they keep on diving into the materialism and the power of this world, instead of investing in the Spirit, a day is going to come in which they're no longer going to be able to get the resources that they need to spiritually live, and they are going to die. It shouldn't surprise us, but it should warn us. For that just isn't a parable about other people and our need to spread the gospel. It's a warning to me and you not to be one of those three types of soils. To make sure that God's grace is going down deep into who we are, to constantly be rooting out the thorns and the thistles of this world, the cares and the concerns of this world that run a danger now to our own faith, especially in this society of materialism, especially in the society that's all about political power. We got to be very careful to begin to root those things out to make sure that they are not in competition with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We got to begin to look at those not just as the totality of who we are, but those four soils as a possibility of different aspects of our lives. That yes, maybe we are allowing His grace to be at work among us in our own private life, but maybe we are the path when it comes to the business world, and we haven't allowed the gospel to penetrate into that area. We don't like this parable very much because it reveals to us a grave warning that just because you're flourishing today, just because it feels as though you have God's grace at this moment, it feels as though you have the promise of eternity ahead of you, just because you have it today does not necessarily mean you're going to have it tomorrow. Let us not grow weary in doing good. For in just the right time, in due season, it's the phrase that's the exact same phrase that Paul used in Galatians chapter 4 when the text said, at just the right time, God sent His Son. It means in a divinely ordered time. Do not let us grow weary in doing good, for we will reap. We will have a harvest at just the right time if we don't give up. Listen to the implication there. What happens if we do give up? What happens if our lives are no longer defined by faith? Now, it's possible that we are in God's kingdom and just going through a difficult season, and there'll be a penalty for that. There's a consequence to that, but we haven't actually lost our faith. But far more often, it implies now that if we give up, we've never truly interacted with the grace of God. That you and I can very easily assimilate ourselves into this place, into American Christianity, and begin to seemingly have some fruit in our lives without God's grace truly taking hold of us. We can almost dabble in His grace just a little bit. And yet, when the pressures of life come in, or the worries of this world take over, our faith will be no more. And all the hope of heaven will be lost. Paul's writing to this church at Galatia. And it's not just a church with problems. Every church has problems. It's a church that is literally teetering now on the edge. And in many ways, the parable of the sowers is beginning to describe the church at Galatia. And Paul knows that they're not the path, for the gospel did begin to take root. But he's beginning to wonder, is it possible? Is it possible that this church is not fully planted in the grace of God, that God's grace has not fully taken hold of them? Is it possible that what's going on right now in the life of this church is that their roots aren't going down deep? And even if there might be some kind of competition going on in their hearts right now. That if left to flourish is going to deem them irrelevant. And so he writes to them and he writes to us. This letter to the book of Galatians that is this treatise now on God's grace. To remind us that, first of all, here's how you came to know Christ. It wasn't that you earned it. It wasn't that you deserved it. It's not that God from heaven looked down and said, well, y'all are a little bit better than everybody else. Let me give you my love. Instead, he looked down on your hopeless estate, the reality that you were without hope and without God, that there was nothing good within you. There was nothing that you could ever do to deserve the grace of God. And God, because of his great love for us, because of nothing that we have done, because of his great love for us, has chosen to love us, has lavished his grace upon us. As that grace came upon us, our eyes were opened in faith to the reality of who he is, what he has done on our behalf, to the true nature and state of who we are, and our hearts were filled with gratitude that he would ever love us. How is it that he could ever love us? And in response to that, we begin to respond, living the life that he wants us to live, to get in step with the Spirit, believing that his life is a better way to live. And yet, if we're not very careful, while we can begin with that grace, if we're not very careful, much like the church at Galatia, we can begin to misplace it, to push it over to the side, to say, yes, grace gets you in the door, but you better work hard to stay here. And there's two basic ways that we can begin to miss the gospel. The first is this idea that we can confuse the message and believe that you and I have to work really hard. We have to get all of our stuff together and make ourselves the best that we can possibly be in hopes that God will love us. And so you better walk an aisle, you better put on the best face you got, you better do all the work, the activity that you can do in the church at Galatia. What it meant is you better get circumcised, you better worship on the right days and go to the temple and do all the right things and outwardly appear as good as you possibly can, no matter what's going on the inside of your heart. And if you can get all the outside exactly right, maybe you can stand in line for God's love. And that's a temptation for us. We can miss God's grace in that way. Turn it into a works kind of theology that, man, I got to come to church and I got to vote the right way and do the right things and outwardly appear as godly as I can to look better than everybody else so that God will love me more than he loves them. But there's another way to miss the gospel. The other way to miss the gospel is to properly hear the story of God's grace. That God loves you in a way that you do not deserve to be loved, that he has taken your sin away and forgiven you in every way. But then to just assume that it doesn't have to have any impact in my life. I have the promises of heaven, and I look forward to that, and it will mean a lot one day. But between now and then, I can do whatever it is that I want to do. That's not the gospel. I'm forgiven, so it doesn't matter. That's not the gospel. The gospel is that God's grace has been lavished upon us, our eyes have been opened in faith, and now we desire to respond to his love with a life that now exudes a gratitude for what he has done for us. In no way am I trying to accomplish, trying to earn God's love. And yet at no time could I ever receive God's grace and then respond in no way whatsoever. For God's grace, for it truly to be God's grace that has opened my eyes, it now requires me to respond in faith to say, God, this is a better way to live. I want to follow you. And you know what? Paul knows, especially in the church at Galatia, that if they're trying to follow Jesus, it's not always easy. That there is this great deal of struggle. And so he writes to them to encourage them. Don't let all this be for naught. All the things that God has done for you, all the places that he has taken you, all the persecutions that you've endured for this newfound family that you created, all the lives that have been changed and been touched. Don't let all this be for naught and simply throw it away. Because either you can't take a little persecution, or because you become so infatuated with money and material and power and fame and the competition of your neighbors, that you lose sight of God's grace and simply in faith doing that which is right. And he can look at this church in Galatia where there's so much infighting going on, and he can see that some of them might be tempted in this moment to say, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this. You have these Judaizers coming in, and there's all this squabbling that's taking place, all this infighting that's going on, all this debate over what is the true gospel. And you can see some of them going, I just can't take all this. And so Paul writes to them, and in the midst of giving this ethical teaching of here's how we respond to the gospel, here's what it looks like. He tells them, don't grow weary in doing good. Now, he's not saying in that moment that you and I do not have the right to feel tired. Instead, I actually think he's tipping his hat to that. I think he's revealing to us that, you know what, as you try to live out your faith, as you try to love others who aren't like you, as you try to serve others who maybe don't want to be served, as you try to have joy in the midst of difficult circumstances, as you try to be good when it's returned with hate, as you try to be gentle when everybody else is so aggressive, when you try to have some self-control when everybody else is lawless in every way, as you're trying to live out your faith, there are going to be days in which you're going to be tired. You're not going to want to love again. You're not going to want to forgive again. You're not going to want to have to apologize again, to have the difficult conversation again. You're not going to want to replenish your heart, to restore joy, to rejoice, to put joy back in your heart in the midst of, there are going to be times where you're going to be tired. You're not going to want to do it again. But in those moments, make sure that in faith, you keep on doing what is good. No matter what your mind feels in the moment, no matter what your emotions say in the moment, no matter what your body says in the moment, do not be led astray by the temporary emotions of the day, but instead in faith, keep on doing good. Don't grow weary of that. If you're tired, if you're exhausted, that's okay. Recognize it. Find ways to replenish your heart, but even in the midst of the exhaustion, make sure that what you stop doing is not the good things. Now, there is within this, I think, a good prayer. Lord, let us grow weary of doing evil. Let us grow weary of selfishness. Let us grow weary of materialism. Let us grow weary of the useless competition of pride. Lord, let me grow weary of trying to keep up with my neighbors. Let me grow weary of comparing my life to somebody else's life. Let me grow weary of feeling like I have to give my kids just everything in the world so that they will have everything that their friends have. Let me grow weary of that, Lord. Let me stop that. But don't let me grow weary of doing good. Don't ever let me grow weary of listening to my wife. Don't ever let me grow weary of being gentle with my children. Don't ever let me grow weary of having joy in the midst of hard and difficult times. Don't let me grow weary in being kind to other people. Don't let me grow weary in showing gentleness in a world that has no gentleness. Don't let me grow weary of developing the disciplines to have self-control in my life, though nobody else does. Don't let me grow weary of the good things. Because I know if I grow weary of those things, I know if I stop doing those things, I know if I do not allow God's grace to flow through me to accomplish what it is that He wants to accomplish, there is a threat, there is a danger that God's grace is not real to me. And I don't want to experience that. God, empower me, energize me, give me the faith to keep on keeping on. Don't let me grow weary of that. But you know, there's a danger. There's a danger that the longer you go, the longer you love Jesus, the longer a church exists, that over time as the newness wears off, the thrill and the excitement grows dim, that you can begin to foolishly stop doing the very things that God has called you to do. Imagine if you won the lottery today. I mean, not that any of you play, but imagine, we all have friends or relatives that, would add us in, probably not relatives, that would sign us onto the ticket as well, right? So let's imagine my dad won the lottery today, and he signed me on the ticket as well, just out of guilt, right? And so what is it? Let's say it's $200 million, right? So he'd keep 100 for himself, give 80 to my sister, and give me 20, right? And so let's say I got $20 million. That'd be a lot of fun, wouldn't it? I mean, that would be a lot of fun. $2 million immediately to the church. No questions asked, don't pass go. $2 million, right? We're committed, faithful followers of Jesus Christ. If you win the lottery, you tithe. Amen? Amen. Okay. And if not, Lord, strike me dead. Amen? Oh, no, I don't know. Ananias the fire, I've read that story. I don't know about that, right? So let's say you won $20 million, right? $2 million to the church, you got $18 million left. What is that? $10 million to the government, you got $8 million left. Suddenly I'm living some of your lives. But let's say I got $8 million. That's pretty cool. My preaching would become much more truthful. All right? I'd still preach. I'd be here next week. I wouldn't be here Monday through Friday, but I'd be here next week. And I would preach the truth. It'd be fun. No limitations of what you can do and couldn't do. You want airplanes, get airplanes. You want to play golf wherever you want to play golf with. You want to join, whatever you want to do, right? How long before that would grow old? You know it would, right? You know it would. There's no question that there would be a honeymoon phase, but eventually that would grow old. You know, psychologists have studied it. It takes 18 months. It takes 18 months for a lottery winner to return back to whatever state of happiness they had before they won the lottery. So if you're miserable before, you'll be miserable 18 months later. Interestingly enough, the same thing is true with marriage. It's less for buying a house. It's less for buying a car. But studies have proven that you will always come back to whatever level of satisfaction you had before you got the money, before you got the relationship, before you got the material thing. How long would it take before that would wear off? It happens with everything. Good or bad, as time passes, the emotional euphoria of the new experience wears off and reality begins to set in. And that's okay, that's life. It's true of marriage. People shouldn't be shocked by that. The honeymoon phase wears off. If you're in a new relationship, if you're newly married and you think, I'm going to forever feel like this, no, you're not. And that's okay. That'll give that love a chance to mature and become more real than just emotional in the moment. Those who say the honeymoon has never worn off for me, in my opinion, are liars. The same thing is true with your faith. You come to Jesus, and there is this freeing feeling of your sin being lifted from you, of the promise of eternity, of today having a hope and a purpose and a meaning and a value, of God having a plan for your life. And there is this new euphoria. It's one of the reasons I love being around this place and seeing people get baptized as they come to know Jesus and being around them and the excitement that comes with a new believer. I kind of remember what that once was like. I don't have that same feeling anymore, but just being around those people re-energizes me, reminds me of why it is that we do what we do. So you come to Jesus and sometimes you have all those feelings, but eventually those feelings begin to wear off. And if you're not very careful, you can begin to grow weary of doing the very good things that used to just come naturally to you. That used to just be a common response of faith. But now it takes a little bit more energy and effort, and you grow weary of it, and in most cases what happens is you begin to compare yourself and look at these other people who aren't doing those things, and you think, I kind of want to be like them. And much like a recovering addict who hits rock bottom and recognizes their need and begins to go to meetings and begins to get the therapy they need and surrounds themselves with a healthy community and they start making great progress, there's a great temptation that down the road just a little bit, that they can get to feeling so good that they can deceive themselves into thinking, I don't need these meetings anymore. I can go back to these old places. I can restore these old friendships. And very slowly they will stop doing the good that is actually helping them be healthy. And in apathy, they will return back to their old way of life. What Paul is saying here to the church at Galatia, what Paul is saying to me and you, is don't grow weary of doing good. For in due season, we are going to reap. The picture there is that of a harvest. It's actually an image he started just a couple verses earlier. Whenever he said, don't be deceived, God cannot be mocked. Whatever a man sows, he will reap. If you and I sow to the flesh, we will reap from the flesh. If we sow to the Spirit, we will reap for the Spirit. Therefore, do not grow weary in doing good. For at just the right time, you will reap a harvest if we don't give up. Which means the challenge for us is in the midst of seasons of life in which we're exhausted, or in the midst of just the reality of life when it's coming over us at such high rates of speed and demanding so much from us, you and I have to keep the proper vision. A harvest. He puts out there a picture of imagine a field, that field is yours. And if you will keep on planting by doing good, if in faith you will keep on doing good, that you are planting seeds into a future harvest, a field that you can't see right now, but one day you will. And if you will keep on doing that, a day is going to come at just the right moment in which you will reap a beautiful harvest. But if you give up, you won't. Now, what's the good that he's talking about here? It could be just in general, a general concept of good. You and I kind of know what's good. And so if you're a teacher, what he's saying here is don't grow weary of teaching the students. Now, I know all the red tape and all the government officials are making your life miserable, but don't grow weary of why you're actually there. That means if you're a student, don't grow weary of studying. I know finals are coming up, and I know there's a high demand of what's going on. I know you paid a price so far, but don't grow weary of doing that good of what you're supposed to do. That means if you're a parent, don't grow weary of loving your children. If you're a spouse, don't grow weary of listening to your spouse, of doing the hard work that makes it happen, of showing some intentionality about it. The good here could just be a general good. The context here also could be the idea of don't grow weary in the midst of physical struggles. In just the next verse, in verses 11, 12, and 13, Paul says, notice with what big words I write to you, what big letters I write to you in my own hand. Many scholars believe that Paul was struggling with blindness, and it was beginning to limit him in what he could do, so that the actual letters that he wrote in the New Testament, he would actually say out loud, and then somebody would come along and write those down for him because he couldn't see any longer. And at the end of some letters, he would write with his own hand to show that they were authentically his. Imagine how frustrating that must have been for Paul. Having this passion, this mission of his own life, of all the things that he wanted to accomplish, remembering his youth, of ways that he suffered, and yet not having the strength that he once had, not being able to do what he once was able to do. And it must have been tempting in that moment for him to have said, you know what, I've done my part. I can barely see any longer, and so Timothy and Titus, they're going to have to pick this up. I've done what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to sit back now in retirement and let them take over. But then he tells himself, no, don't grow weary in doing good. Don't grow weary in the midst of this blindness. Don't grow weary in the midst of this aging. Don't grow weary. Don't use that as an excuse. Yes, you might have to back off a little bit. No, you may not be able to do all the things that you used to be able to do, but never use your age now as an excuse. Never say, well, I paid my price. It's time for somebody else to pay their price, and use that as an excuse to stop doing the very things that God has called you to do. Don't grow weary in that until God takes you home. Work out his plan in your life. Another context that's going on here is a financial context. The image of the harvest here comes from the earlier verses in verses 6, 7, and 8, where Paul tells the church at Galatia, don't grow weary in giving. that financial times were very tough in Galatia, and it might have hurt them financially to actually become a Christian, and yet he put in plan and place this idea of giving money to the local church for a point and for a reason, and Paul comes right out of that into this, don't be deceived, God can't be mocked. What a man reaps, he will harvest. If he sows the flesh, he'll reap from the flesh. If he sows from the Spirit, he'll reap from the Spirit. And do not grow weary in being good. Do not grow weary in giving. But it's so tempting. Financial times come, personal needs come along. We've given for so long, we've given so much sacrificially. It's tempting in that moment to begin to take that money and instead of giving it the way you're supposed to give it to God, to the church, you begin to give it to yourself. And there's more bills and new homes and new cars and demands are upon us and college funds have to be set up. And you can even justify it in good ways. There's a lot of other great nonprofits in town. I'm just going to move it over to those areas. And they do great work and they do wonderful things, but there's a unique call and mission of the church. We are active and involved in all these other needs, but ultimately we are to proclaim the gospel. None of those other nonprofits are really about that. And so what Paul is saying to the church here at Galatia is, I know it's tempting. The longer you give, I know it's tempting to grow weary of that and to justify it to yourself, but don't grow weary. What is this, the 21st angel tree? Think about the number of kids helped. All the time and energy that we've spent on that. How easy would it be for us to begin to say, you know what? Not this year. We've done our time. And every ministry here has a season, there's no doubt. We're not going to do the same thing forever. The format by which we help other people will always change, and that's part of it. But imagine walking by that tree today and just going, you know what, I've done my time. It doesn't matter. Just such a small, subtle little thing that if it's an individual scenario, it means nothing. But if that's just a little bit of a seed that begins to take root in your life to where you just very slowly begin to step back. Because here's what happens. Don't grow weary in doing good. It's not as though that we go so weary of doing good that we just start doing evil. You know what? I've tried this good path for a long time. I think I'll try this other path. It doesn't happen that way. Much more subtle, much more slow. Don't grow weary in doing good. We get tired. And we think, well, we just want to back off a little bit. And we just back off very subtly from serving, from giving, from participating, from engaging. And very slowly, very subtly, we stop sowing to the Spirit and we begin to sow to the flesh. And before we even realize it, we can't even recognize our own faith anymore. All because we gave up. And what Paul is saying here is, you will never regret loving somebody. You will never regret rejoicing in such a way that you put joy in your heart in the midst of difficult times. You will never regret fighting for peace in the midst of chaos. You will never regret being patient when you didn't want to be patient. You will never regret being kind and gentle and good. You will never regret being faithful, having some self-control, some restraint about you in a world that has none. You will never regret those things. And so whenever your heart is weary, whenever you're struggling with the hardships, the physical realities of life, of aging, whenever you're in a difficult season, have the right vision. Recognize that you care far more about a field in heaven one day than the size of your yard today. That you care more about the spiritual realities of your children than their athletic prowess. That it matters more the impact you will have on generations by your example, by your love for Jesus, than by your corporate title or accomplishments. Can you see it? Can you see what it's going to be like one day? When your time comes and you are in that truck, driving down heaven's dirt road, going to look at your field. And the truck pulls over, and there's life. And every time you acted in faith to do good, to keep on teaching, to keep on loving, to keep on believing, to keep on parenting, to keep on staying married, every time you acted in faith, to say a kind word, to restrain, to forgive. Every time you acted in faith, to believe Him and trust Him, even in the midst of the unknowing, to keep on obeying Him, to stay in step with the Spirit. Every time you acted in faith, God took that and He did good with it. And He multiplies it in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. Can you imagine one day getting out of that truck in heaven and beginning to meet the people that God impacted through your acts of good? What will that be like? That the only reason you're sober today is because 30 years ago, a mom got sober. And God used her sobriety to impact you. That the only reason you know Jesus today is because a group of people got together and decided they wanted to build a church in this place. And they diligently gave and worked and even paid for the seat that you're in right now. What will it be like one day to be able to thank the people that God used to touch you? What will it be like to be thanked by the people where God used you to touch them? Do you for a second believe that you will regret doing good? You won't. But your life will be full of regrets if you simply grow weary and give up. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at just the right time we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. Would you bow your heads in prayer with me?